little bit of an early look at how we're going to be attacking the early rounds of our fantasy football drafts. I say we because, of course, Jake Seeley from The Athletic is here to tell me where I'm wrong, certainly, very shortly, I would imagine. He continues to do that on this show constantly, but we appreciate that. We appreciate someone that's willing to take stands this time of year, Jake. Anyone could come on here and tell me that that CMC is a great first overall pick, just like he was last year, just like he was the year before, like we were telling people. But, Jake, how are you, buddy? You ready to talk through some redraft content? We're just cranking them out today. I love it.
Yeah, I'm good. I'm always ready to talk football. It's funny. Somebody was like, can't believe we're talking when I updated my rankings on the site for the way too early rankings. We're talking football rankings in February 1st. And I was like, thanks for stopping by with that comment. And the person came back and was like, sorry, that was a dick move, wasn't it? But like, hey, he admitted it. We want to talk. We want to talk about it all year long.
I just put out like the video, the compilation video for the Super Bowl, right? And there's people in the comments that were like, yeah, but there was too much of X analysts. I was like, then what do you mean? Everyone was in it. Every one of my guests was in that video. So maybe there was too much of this person, that person. I'm sorry that video took me 3 hours to edit and it was up a day later than I wanted it to be. People will let you know if you do something wrong though, Jake, that's for sure. So this is going to be a fun one. I think that I'm just excited to like finally have the time this year to go a little bit deeper into some best ball stuff. So I want to be early on all this stuff, get everyone ready for their best ball drafts. Obviously, as we progress throughout the offseason, we'll get a lot more ADP data, that sort of thing. But this is like kind of like our true first look. We've been doing the DFS first look all season. Now we get to do a first look kind of at what our first round might look like. So I'm going to throw it on the screen right now. Some of the familiar faces at the top probably shouldn't be, I guess, too surprising. We went through the running backs, Jake, a couple days ago, but Alvin Kamara behind Derrick Henry in my ranking, something we discussed there. So if anyone wants to check out the running back too early rankings, definitely check out that video. But I do have running backs in my top 4. And then it goes to Travis Kelsey at number 5 over Devontae Adams. So that's a big, that's going to be like a big topic this summer, right? Like the Adams versus Kelsey debate, right? Do you want to go after that elite tight end? Do you want to wait and kind of piece it together with tape along the way like we have been a lot of seasons? But Travis Kelsey just seems to be kind of breaking that mold a little bit, right? So do you have any strong feelings, I guess, on the Kelsey versus Adams decision here in the first round?
Yeah, I do. And I'm not going to be one of the ones that do it. I've talked about it a lot with Pat Mayo. Pat Mayo even goes as far as to make the case to take Kelsey and Kittle in the first 2 rounds.
Wow.
And because you're just absorbing 2 things. One is you're going to treat one as a wide receiver in your flex, but also you've just obliterated the value for everybody else at the position. So you have such a leg up. So it's the argument, I'm making Pat's case for him, but it's the argument of Kelsey in his own right in the first round has to do what he just did for the value to be right. Because what I always bring up, and I say, even if he's 2019 Kelsey, which was a terrific season, number 1 tight end, great year by Travis Kelsey, tons of fantasy potential and production. But if you put him at wide receiver in 2019, he's wide receiver 11, maybe 10, depending on your format. If you do last year, it's top 5 wide receiver. You just set the record and all that type of stuff. But that's the thing. You have to have last year, not 2019, which was still an amazing year. It's just, he's an amazing year, puts him in the second round. So I bring up that point, but where Pat was saying why you take both is because now, even if you only get 2019 Kelsey, the drop off from what everybody else has at tight end is where you get that advantage. I don't do it for a couple of reasons. Is also because you tie up your flex spot immediately. And that hampers what you can do in the rest of your draft. Basically, if you're sitting there in the 5th round and you tight end, running back, because you don't want to get obliterated. But and all of a sudden, a running back value sitting there in the 5th round that you didn't expect. You're like, oh my God, I can't believe blank is still on the board. You're screwed. Too bad. You're not going to take a bench spot there because you'll never be able to play. Like, I understand the value, but you're never able to play that guy because you've already plugged Kittle in. So that's why I would never do that. But the Kelsey in the first round, I'll also never do because you can get Kittle in the second. And that's where I'll go is I'll say the drop off from Kelsey to Kittle is not enormous enough for what I'm going to give up at running back or wide receiver. Like, you're giving up Adams or Hill or Diggs and dropping down to like a Jefferson or a Metcalf or something like that. That's a bigger gap for me than you talk about Kittle being there for 16 games. So I think that's why. But if you want to do it, I'm not going to say you're wrong to do it. I'm just telling you why I'd never do it.
Yeah, we love Pat Mayo here. First off, I don't think I would do the two tight end strategy. I understand it. You're screwing everyone else, I guess, in terms of the value of that position, but it's also one of like the least important positions there is anyway. Like piecing it together as the season goes on, I'd rather do that than try and piece together an elite wide receiver or elite running back. Obviously, if you're drafting in that position, maybe you don't have some of those running back studs to really go after that we talked about in the top four. But still, like I guess having like a Saquon Barkley or like you said, a Devontae Adams or Tyreek Hill, I still think I'd rather have those be my cornerstone pieces of my roster. Like we've talked about this before, but you can't necessarily win your fantasy draft in the first round, but you can lose it. Isn't that one of the things that people like to say? So I don't think that you necessarily can lose it by drafting Travis Kelsey. Like I said, I have him ahead of Devontae Adams, but I don't think that I would go as far as taking him and Kittle in the first couple picks. But interesting strategy to say the least. Do you have any, I guess, disagreement in kind of the top end running backs, or are you just kind of cycling through that top four? Do you think there's a tier gap between McCaffrey, Cook, or Derrick Henry being in there a little bit higher? What's I guess, how's your top end looking? We kind of skipped right over it because I think the Kelsey thing's really interesting.
Yeah, it's McCaffrey, Cook. After that, your rankings, I didn't do my overall, but yet my biggest thing is I don't want the number 3 pick. Yep. I don't, because we made the debate on your running back shows. Like I could see the case for me still going for the ups. Like Henry, we just saw his peak. We've seen Kamara's peak. I think if anybody could unseat Christian McCaffrey, it's a healthy Saquon Barkley or Dalvin Cook, and Christian McCaffrey takes a little bit of a step back. So that's why I made the case for Barkley. Obviously, there's a ton of risk. Barkley is by far the riskiest. He's honestly looking right now, you have him at 7. He's probably riskier than anybody until you get down to DeAndre Hopkins at 11. That's just because DeAndre Hopkins is a wide receiver. So I understand it, but I'm looking at it also. I'm looking at yours, and I don't want number 3. I don't want number 4. I don't want number 5. I probably want 6 or 7. And I usually don't like being in the middle because I kind of want a quicker. I don't love the turn, but you can make some damage on the turn because you get to go back. And hell, Kelsey Kittle could really screw some people up. There's a perfect example. But I want to be able to react a little bit quicker on my second pick just in case. Like the middle of the round, you're always open to runs as much as you are in the ends in a different way. So what I look at is like, I usually don't love the middle, but why I do in the first round is because now the Henry, Kamara, Kelsey, Adams, Barkley, Hill, like that decision was made for me. Now it's down to 2 people at 6. Whereas number 3, I have to be the first one to pull out of that group.
Yeah, I'm with you. The number 3 pick is going to be a really difficult one this year because even if like one of those ones works out and you see Devontae Adams go crazy for the rest of the year, even Saquon, a guy that we were talking about as like the 1A, 1B with Christian McCaffrey for the number 1 overall pick at times within the last couple of years, I think that Saquon should be coming back for a step. It's just he has to battle through so much adversity on that team, the quarterback play, the offensive line, like all of that stuff. But he's that elite talent. He's going to get a ton of volume. Like I struggle with guys like Ezekiel Elliott. He's kind of in the back half of my list here just because he hasn't looked very good, but that team just can beat you in so many ways on offense. Like, but we saw it when Dak was healthy last year. Ezekiel Elliott was still a top 5 guy, so he's the one that's kind of I struggle with a little bit also versus like a wide receiver like DeAndre Hopkins or someone I guess in the back end of the running back tier where it's like a Nick Chubb, Austin Eckler, those type of guys. So I think it's a really interesting turn, not one that I think it feels like a real slam dunk. Like you want one of these elite options at running back, in my opinion, if you can help it. You can't really piece together that running back elite volume guy out of the air on the ground. You can throw Derrick Henry in there because he gets so much volume on the ground that it almost kind of, and he breaks all those big plays, the efficiency side of things. So you can't really just find one of those guys later, right? So I struggle a little bit with even just like pulling the trigger on a Stephon Diggs at number 10. I love Stephon Diggs, but I guess that's one. Like I guess Stephon Diggs versus like the Jonathan Taylor, Ezekiel Elliott tier. Any thoughts on like the back end of the first round?
Yeah, I'm gonna this from the running back show. I'm gonna have a lot of Ezekiel just said. Obviously, this is assuming the Cowboys are smart and bring back Dak Prescott. Right. But those first 5 games, he was honestly, he wasn't even just top 5, he was top 3, and he had double digits in every single game, and he hadn't even rushed for 100 yards because he didn't need to. Scoring touchdowns, ton of usage in the passing game. There's only 2 rushing games with over 100 yards were later in the season. One was when he took that week off when everybody thought he was banged up, and he came back and destroyed the Eagles. I still think that Zeke has that in him. Obviously, he's not on that upper tier like he was this past year, but I love Diggs. No one loves Diggs as much as you do, but I would still take Zeke over Diggs. I would take him over Hopkins, and mostly just because that's how I feel about Zeke. Like I just think that He's in the next group. He's not in the tier of Henry, but Ezekiel Elliott, Jonathan Taylor, and then depending on where Aaron Jones ends up, and for me, even James Robinson, those kind of 20 touch per game workloads are going to push me towards them over anybody not named Adams or Hill or Kelsey. So where you have Diggs and Hopkins in your first round, they would start my third round with Zeke moving up, James Robinson, potentially even Aaron Jones. You even have Nick Chubb at 14. I could see a case where you take Nick Chubb over DeAndre Hopkins. A lot's going to depend on that offense. Kingsbury's usage and Murray not being healthy really throws a question mark onto Hopkins for next year.
Yeah, actually, I was considering doing exactly what you just said, even moving Zeke and Chubb ahead of Hopkins and Eckler. So I think that's still, that back end is something that's going to be a little bit fluid, I think, throughout the offseason for me for sure. Jake, let's wrap up with at least a little bit of if you're going to be doing zero running back. If you're not, are you a proponent of zero running back? Or are you not? Everyone wants to talk about this. I rarely have done something like that, but I do know some sharp people that are doing some higher stakes teams that still kind of beat that drum every year. So I guess what side of that argument are you on? Is it a year by year thing? Is it someone you still just want to get those elite running backs? That's kind of the side I'm on.
Yeah, it's never been zero RB. Zero RB worked out that 1 year, and the big reason it worked, and the reason it worked. Look, I will say this because any strategy can work. Anything, 2 tight ends can work. Is when you're doing it and nobody else is doing it. The thing that killed zero RB is not zero RB's strategy in its own right. What killed zero RB is multiple people being on it. Even if you get 3 people in your league trying to do it, that's where it gets ruined because everybody's chasing the same people in the waiver wire. You're only going to get 1 or 2 of those options versus 3 or 4 of those options, or even late draft picks. And now you're lessening your odds. It's basically like, playing the lottery, increasing the number of balls that you have to pick correctly is where it used to be. You only have to pick, or actually, I guess you say you got 3 shots out of 5. Now you're only getting 1 shot out of 5. And that's the problem. So multiple people doing zero RB is what kills you. If you have 2 or 3 people trying to do the tight end route, like that's going to hurt people. So, zero RB's never been mine. I said like 1 RB, and then Chris Vaccaro said he's always called it bell cow RB. And I like that. The hashtag bell cow RB is 1 bell cow. And it doesn't have to be the first round. But the first 2 rounds, I need 1. I need 1 guy I know is going to get 20 touches. That's why I brought up James Robinson. Nick Chubb's a good one. 1 guy I know every single week, his floor is about 10 points, but every single week he's got that upside for 20 plus. I need that one. First 2 rounds, I need to come away with that, whether it's Kelsey, one of those guys, whether it's one of those guys, then Jefferson or something like that. So that's where I've been. That's brought me the most success. That's what I'll always go to. Zero RB, in my opinion, was never a thing because when it happened, it wasn't an industry thing. It happened and it was smart people. The guy that Sean, I can't think of his last name that came up with it, but it was too late. Like it was done. It's kind of the GameStop thing. It was done, but once people found out about it, you had to have already done it. You know what I'm saying? Like it was too late to come into it afterwards. So it was never really a thing, in my opinion.
Yeah, and just like coming from like a more heavier background in DFS, like one of the other things that I'm trying to piece together is I understand it like the late round quarterback, all of that stuff, quarterback, especially if you're playing a 1 quarterback league, like there's different ways to piece that together throughout the year. Is there any sort of argument for there being just like a different type of tier now, these running quarterbacks, Josh Allen, Kyler Murray, that just give you such a nice floor already? Like are those guys that you could see yourself kind of stretching for in the mid rounds, and more or less you'd rather just wait and try and gap guys out later on? Have you thought that through yet?
Yeah, that's actually a good comparison too. Is that when everybody started doing the late quarterback and wait, yes, the values were still there and supreme values on your return on investment never really went away.
Yeah,
but it made more difficult to find those guys because people were taking 2 quarterbacks. And I had all these people in my comments. Well, yeah, I can't go find even Baker Mayfield on the waiver wire because 10 out of the 12 teams in my league own 2 quarterbacks, or some people even potentially have a third because everybody was trying to do it. You have 1 or 2, 3 teams trying to get the big guys, and then everybody's going to take 1 rookie and 1 stud and, that type of stuff. So that's another good example of where it doesn't really work once everybody starts doing it. I think we are starting to see the industry come around, and this is where, I'm not being like, oh, look at me, this is where I've always been, but it's a good strategy, and that's why the industry is coming around, is getting that quarterback. Mahomes, I'm never going to get because I'll take Mahomes if he falls to the 3rd round. He never makes it to the 3rd round. Right. I'll consider Murray and Josh Allen in the 4th, 5th round, preferably. They never make it that far. Dak Prescott, I was in a draft, a way too early draft recently. Got to the 6th round. I'm taking Dak there if he gets there every single time. I will own 100% Dak Prescott if his ADP never moves from the 6th round. But I think that 6th to 8th round is that sweet spot where you could see Deshaun Watson there again. Aaron Rodgers wasn't even there last year. Maybe Winston, if he is the starter, Justin Herbert in his 2nd year, Trevor Lawrence, depending on how people feel about him, who has that Justin Herbert upside, and then some, Joe Burrow coming back. But you're going to see a lot of quarterbacks populate that 6th, 7th, 8th round, and you can get somebody that you don't have to play the game, the waiver wire game with, that maybe isn't Patrick Mahomes, but it's similar to the tight end argument. No, you're not getting 26 every single week, but 22, you can live with that.
I kind of like the Dak argument just for like kind of piecing through this. If we're going to be going through our best ball drafts, like you get Dak and then you know which guys you're targeting in the mid range just to try and stack up that team in general. If you feel like this team, obviously on defense, they're still going to not be very good. And Dak, when he was healthy, was one of the best. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Jake, wasn't he like top 2 in fantasy points per game when healthy this year? Like number 1. Yeah. So there you go. So I think that's one of the ones that makes sense for best ball in particular, because you can get those weapons later on. Like if you are trying to stack up the Chiefs, it's a lot harder to do that because you can't get Kelsey, Tyreek, and Mahomes like in most drafts, right? So that's one. I think the Dak one makes a lot of sense, because if you're getting Dak, you probably don't have Zeke. So you already don't have to worry about that. You're almost playing the other side of that. Maybe the run game isn't the one that you really want. So I like to think about it, if anything, just through the correlation aspect of it. So we're going to continue to kind of talk through this as the season goes on, man. But this is great. Everyone should check out Jake's rankings, of course, over at The Athletic. If you're checking out these videos, check out our 2 early ranking videos as well for each of the positions. And it's going to be a fun summer, man. I'm excited to dive into the weeds a little bit deeper than I have the last few years. It's been busy, but now we're finally going to make some time to do some best ball, man. I'm excited.
That's good times.